Welcome to week 2 of remote learning. Hope everybody had a great first week. I know that some of you reached out to me last week about giving you second chances on quizzes. For the first quiz, a lot of you had questions marked wrong. For the free response, they were actually correct, so I went in and graded those by hand. So you might take a look at those again and see if your grades changed. If you have not completed last week's lesson, please get that done before you start this week's lesson. Today we're going to focus on factoring quadratic polynomials. And if you'll remember from last week's lesson, a quadratic is when you have a degree 2 polynomial. So we're going to start off with a little bit of review of multiplying polynomials. Then we will move into our new topic, which is factoring quadratics. And then your homework this week is you will have just one quiz, and it will be in Canvas like last week. It's called Factoring Quadratics, and once again, you will not need an access code. My office hours are a little bit different this week. Monday, they are going to be from 2 to 3, and then the rest of the week, they will be from 1 to 2. But please remember that you can reach out to me through email at any time. So let's get started. So from before school released, you guys were working on multiplying polynomials. You did this with Mr. Woolley, and if you recall, if we want to multiply, these would be called binomials because they each contain 2 terms. If we want to multiply, we use the area model. A lot of you said this is when you draw the box, but I'm going to refer to it as the area model. So if we draw that box, we can, again, use the area model to multiply these. Personally, I like to fill in the first term, so the x plus 5. So I put that across the top. But again, that's really trying to show you how long that side is. So if the top is x plus 5, remember the bottom will also be x plus 5. Some of you only write it on the top, which is fine, but I prefer to write it on the top and the bottom. And then going down, up and down, I'm going to label that one as x plus 2. Again, I like to write it on the left side and the right side. Again, important reminder, again, this is called area model, and I try to stress that to get you guys to think about each time you're finding the area of each of those 4 little blocks. So in the top left-hand corner, if we multiply x times x, we will get x squared. Moving to the right, if we multiply the 2 dimensions, a positive 5 times an x will give us 5x. Starting on the second row, if we multiply 2 times x, that will give us 2x. And then don't forget, we're finding area, so we're still continuing to multiply. So 2 times 5 will give us 10. A lot of you tend to, on that last step, change and start adding. But again, think area, area, area. And area is length times width. So now if I want to find the area of the entire huge black box, we're going to take each of the 4 little boxes and combine them. So I'll have x squared plus 5x plus 2x plus 10. And then we know that we can combine like terms. 5x and 2x will give us 7x. Our answer is x squared plus 7x plus 10. So hopefully that was just a good refresher and you guys remember how to find the product. Again, product is another way to say multiply. So we multiply 2 binomials, we are finding the product. This week, instead of multiplying, we are going to be factoring. So it says when using the area model to multiply polynomials, we are given the dimensions of the entire block. We use those to find the area of each of the 4 little blocks in order to write the polynomial in standard form. So that's what we just did. All right, but this is kind of starting a new unit. Had we been in school, you'd be getting a new workbook, but since we are unable to give those to you, we're just going to do the best we can through this video and you guys writing things down and taking notes. So I didn't mention that in the beginning, but if you do not have pencil and paper, you need to get some. It says in this unit we are given the area of each of the 4 little blocks and we need to find the dimensions of the entire big block. So what we do with that, this first case I try to make it super easy. I've given you 4 terms, so we have not done the combining yet. And I'm going to take those 4 terms and put those in the 4 blocks. And so I'm just going to go across. So we're going to start with our x squared, 3x, and since it's positive, I could put a plus sign, but I'm just going to write 3x. We have a 6x, and then we have an 18. And now what we're going to try to do is work backwards. Since we have the insides, we need to find the outside. So we're looking for the dimensions of the entire big block, but we're going to take it step by step. So if we look at this block in the top left-hand corner, and we know the area of that block is x squared. So we have to ask ourselves, what times what would give us x squared? And there's only one way to get x squared. That is if we multiplied x times x. Now, as I said earlier, if this top piece is is x, then the bottom is also going to be x, that same segment. If this side is x, then this is going to be x. And so now, moving across, we can look at the top right-hand corner and we see the area of that block is 3x. So if we know one side is x, the other side has to be 3. But if the top is 3, the bottom will also be 3. Moving to the second row now, this block that has 6x is the area. We know one side is x, so it has to be x times 6 to give me 6x. And if this is 6, then this side would be 6. And this fourth block is what I call my checkbox to make sure is 6 times 3, 18, and it is. So we could express this polynomial in factored form and the 2 dimensions. Again, notice these 3 and the 6 are both positive. So we could write this as x plus 3 times x plus 6. And so you have just factored for the first time. We will do lots more examples, so don't panic if this is not crystal clear just yet. All right, so let's look at another example. X squared plus 12x plus 2x plus 24. Again, step 1, I'm going to fill in the 4 blocks. And again, like last time, we start in the upper left-hand corner and we ask ourselves, what can we multiply to get x squared? And we only have one option. It is x times x. Again, if the top segment is x, then the bottom is x. If the left-hand side is x, the right-hand side is x. Then x times what is going to give me 12x? Well, that would just be 12. If the top is 12, the bottom is 12. Second row, we've got to get a 2x, so that's going to have to be x times 2. And if that side is 2, then the right-hand side would also be 2. And 2 times 12 does indeed give us 24. So again, we've checked that fourth block to make sure it's correct. So my 2 factors are, and again, that is a positive 12 and a positive 2. We're starting out with all positives just to kind of make it a little bit easier, but there will be some instances where you'll have some negative signs. So our 2 factors are x plus 12 and x plus 2. So it says, what if there are only 2 terms? How do I factor this type of quadratic? Well, notice there were 2 terms, so I only drew 2 blocks. So I'm going to fill in my 2 blocks, x squared and a 7x. And then again, it's the same thing. The only thing we can multiply to get x squared is x times x. But if this side is x, then this side is x. We could also say that's x. And then here, x times what's going to give me 7x? It has to be a 7. So this time my factors are x and x plus 7. And we can think of x as our greatest common factor. It's what those 2 terms have in common. Notice I did not draw 4 blocks this time because I do not have 4 terms. There are only 2 terms. Here is another example, x squared plus 10x. Take a minute and try this one on your own. Okay, that was probably more like 30 seconds, but I'm going to go ahead and start filling this in. You can work with me if you were having trouble. So again, step 1, fill in the 2 blocks with the x squared and the 10x. What times what gives us x squared? It would be x times x. And if you would like to put on the bottom as well, you can. And over on the right. And then x times what gives me 10x? That would be a 10. Again, you can fill it in on the top and the bottom. So my 2 factors, one side is x, the other side is x plus 10. So again, we were taking out the greatest common factor is another way to phrase this. So this one is different. It says, what if you have 3 terms? So when we had 4 terms, we drew the 4 blocks. When we had 2 terms, we drew the 2 blocks. So you may be thinking, oh, well, we'll just need to draw 3 blocks. But this one actually doesn't work that way. This is that quadratic trinomial. Again, quadratic because the degree of the polynomial is 2. A trinomial because there are 3 terms. In the first 2 examples, when we drew the 4 blocks, because there are 4 terms, that was because that middle term had not been simplified. So in other words, if we think of it, that 8x could be split up into 2 terms. So that's what we're going to try to figure out in this example. So we're going to have to split it up. Again, we're going to go ahead and fill in the first block, which we know will be x squared, and the last block, which will be the 12. The top block is always your quadratic term, and that last block in the bottom right-hand corner will always be your constant. If you'll notice, I'm using a lot of the vocabulary from last week's lesson. But our issue now is we need to split up that 8x into 2 different pieces. So something we can combine to get an 8x. And you may think, well, there's lots of different things that will give us that, and you are correct. But what we're going to focus on, and let's see how this is going to work here. If you notice this diagonal, if we multiply x squared times 12, we want to know what will multiply to give us, and if we multiply those, that's 12x squared. So I'm going to put this in the top part of this little x here. So I'm looking to see what multiplies to give me 12x squared. And then for the second piece, I want to know what is going to add up to give me that positive 8x. So we have to start thinking about what are the numbers that we can multiply to get 12. So I could just start listing them. So I can have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, and I think that's it. And so all those will multiply to give me 12. Again, I didn't bother with the variable at this point, but then I need to figure out which of those will also add up to 8. So if I look at 1 and 12, 1 plus 12 will give me 13. That's not going to work. 3 and 4 is going to give me 7. That doesn't work, but I think we have a winner here. My 2 and 6, well, if I can get these pins going. Sorry, guys. This 2 and 6 will actually add up to 8, and they multiply to give us 12. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to fill those in. I'm going to have a 2x and a 6x. So we're breaking up that 8x into those 2 pieces. Now, when I get ready to fill these in into my blocks, it does not matter which block gets the 2x and which block gets the 6x. That's totally your choice. I wrote the 2x first, so I'm going to put it on the top, or the 6x second, so I'm going to put it on the bottom. Again, that part does not matter. And now this looks like what we had before. So we are ready to factor. So what gives us x squared? Once again, it's still x times x. If the top is x, the bottom is x. If the left is x, the right is x. x times what is going to give us 2x, so that would be 2. The top is 2, the bottom is 2. Then if we move to the second row to get a 6x, I'm going to have to do x times 6. But if that's 6, this is 6. Check your bottom right-hand corner. That fourth block is 6 times 2, 12. It is. So my two factors, the factored form for this polynomial, would be x plus 2 and x plus 6. Again, because the numbers in the problem, just a 2 and a 6 are positive numbers, not negative numbers, which is why we use plus signs. So to recap, we looked at the 8x, and we've had to break that up into two pieces, but instead of just randomly picking numbers that will add up to 8, we also had to look at that diagonal and ask ourselves, what can we multiply to give us 12x squared, and what can we add together to give us 8x? I'm sure this is not super clear just yet, so be patient. We're going to work several more examples. X squared plus 6x plus 5. So again, I'm going to start off filling in the top box with the x squared, and in the bottom right-hand corner, that is my constant. Again, we're going to see, looking at this diagonal, what multiplies to give me 5x squared. So I'm going to put that in the top part. So I'm going to know what can multiply to give me 5x squared. And then I want to see what can add to give me that positive 6x. So I start thinking, and this one is actually pretty short and sweet. If we look at 5x squared, and again, just thinking of the 5, the only numbers that we can multiply to get 5 are 1 times 5. So this one's pretty easy. So we're going to have a 1x and a 5x. So if we multiply those, we get 5x squared. And if we add them together, we get 6x. Again, if you do not want to write the 1 in front of the x, you're not required to. But I'm trying for teaching purposes to show that. So I'm going to, again, put the 1x on the top just because I feel like it, and I'll put the 5x here. And now we're ready to factor. Again, what times what gives us x squared? Moving across the first row, we know if that side is x, that this is x. If the top is x, the bottom is x. X times what gives me 1x? That would be a 1. The top is 1, the bottom is 1. Going to the second row, if we have 5x, x times, that would be 5 to give me 5x. If the left is 5, the right is 5, and then we can check to make sure that fourth block works. And it does. 1 times 5 is 5. So my two factors are the dimensions, x plus 1 and x plus 5. That is the factored form of our quadratic trinomial that we had written in standard form as our problem. So again, that one's actually a little bit easier because we only had one option. There were only two numbers that we can multiply to get a 5, whereas in the previous example, we had 3 different choices of numbers that we could multiply to get 12. So we only need 2 blocks this time. I'm going to do this one freehand. So in the first block, I'm going to fill in the x squared. The second block, I put the 12x. Then what times what gives us x squared? That's x times x. Again, you can put it on the bottom if you would like. Again, if the left side is x, the right side is x. And then we ask ourselves, x times what gives us 12x? And that is 12. So my two factors are x and x plus 12. So if you have only two terms, you only draw 2 blocks. If you have 4 terms, then you're going to draw those 4 blocks. But if you have 3 terms, you're still going to have to draw 4 blocks. Notice it's always an even number of boxes that we're drawing. All right, this one says, can we factor x squared plus 7x plus 9? So again, that key word there is can we. So there must be something a little bit different if they're not even sure that we can actually factor this. So let's start out. fill in the first block with our x squared. We fill in a 9 in the constant box. Then remember, we're trying to see what's going to multiply to give me x squared times 9, which would be 9x squared. So I'm going to put that in the top. So again, we're what multiplies to give me 9x squared. And then we want to see what will add up to give me 7x. So just like in the previous examples, I'm going to start listing what can I multiply that will give me 9. I have 1 times 9, and I have 3 times 3. And then I need to decide which one of those add up to 7. Well, 1 plus 9 is 10, and 3 plus 3 is 6, so it doesn't work. So for this one, it's not possible. So our answer would be no. We can't factor this polynomial because there are no factors of 9 that will add up to 7. So please be aware that not all polynomials will factor, but keep in mind, typically when we give you problems and say factor these, we are giving you questions that actually will factor. But just in case you run into one that you can't get to factor, again, email me, but I think all the ones that I've put in the practice are ones that will factor. So it's time for you to practice. I want you to press pause and work through these examples on your own paper. Again, drawing your blocks each time. Notice that there are several questions that only have 2 terms. So I'm highlighting those. Remember, you will need to draw just 2 blocks for questions 9, 11, and 15. For the other, for the rest of the questions, you will need to be drawing in the 4 blocks to find those solutions. So again, work these out on your own paper, and when you have finished, you may press play and continue to check your answers. Okay, I'm assuming that you have now checked your answers and you are ready to move on. So I'm going to continue to the next slide. Okay, for 7 through 9, I'm going to work those first. I've already drawn the blocks in to make this go a little bit quicker. So we'll start out filling in our x squared and our 16. Then I'm going to draw my x. I'm trying to figure out what multiplies to give me 16x squared. So I'm going to put that in the top part of my x. And then I want to see what is going to add up to give me that 8x. So I'll put that down here in the bottom. So first we're going to list the factors of 16. So we have 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. So we have to look at these and decide which one of these pairs adds up to 8, because we know they all multiply to give us 16. And the ones that add up to 8 are going to be your 4 and your 4. So we're going to take those 2 4s and we can fill them in here in our x. Let's choose a different color that shows up. So 4x and 4x. So I'm going to go up here and fill those in. And now we are ready to find our factors. Again, I think you figured out by now that this first one and every problem we've done has been x times x to give us x squared. Again, filling in the far right in the bottom with those same dimensions. You may think back to Children's Barnyard in Unit 7 where we did that really long example with Mr. Woolley figuring out all the dimensions. So here we have x times, and that would be 4 to give us 4x. So the bottom is 4. On the second row, again, it's still a 4x, so that's got to be a 4. And then we check that bottom box to make sure it's right, and 4 times 4 does give us 16. So my 2 factors are x plus 4 and x plus 4. You may remember another way to write x plus 4 times x plus 4. We could have just said x plus 4 squared. So just kind of a reminder of different ways to write your answers. All right, let's look at question 8. Start off the same way. Fill in the top corner and the bottom corner with your x squared and your 32. I'm going to make my x here. Again, I'm looking to see what multiplies to give me 32x squared. And then I want to see what will add to give me that 12x. So like before, let's list out the factors of 32. 1 and 32, 2 and 16, 4 and 8. And if we look at those three sets of factors, I think we have already found the one that will add up to 12, which will be your 4 and your 8. So now we can go fill in our two blocks with, I can put it here on the x first. So we've got our 4x and our 8x. And again, it doesn't matter which one goes first. Then we write our factors. X times x will give us x squared. Can fill in the other sides. X times 4 will give us 4x. Fill in the 4 at the bottom. X times 8 would give us 8x. So the right hand side is also 8. Double check, is 4 times 8, 32? Indeed it is. So our two factors are x plus 4 and x plus 8. And finally, for number 9, notice this time there are only two blocks because there are only two terms. So I can fill in my x squared and my 8x. So as we have seen over and over again, x times x gives us x squared. Again, feel free to put it on the bottom if you would like. Over here on the far right, we know that is x, so x times 8. And so for this one, we just have x and x plus 8 as our two factors. So that one looks different than number 7 and 8 because there were only two terms. All right, here we have the solutions for 10 through 12. Again, I've gone ahead and drawn in the boxes already. So for the first one, we're going to fill in our x squared and our 14. We're trying to figure out what will multiply to give me 14x squared. And we want to see what will add to give me that 9x. So we're going to list our factors of 14, 1 and 14, and 2 and 7. So we don't have a whole lot of choices this time. And then we look and we say, well, which one of these two is going to add up to 9? And that would be the 2 and the 7. So we're going to fill in. It's going to be a 2x and a 7x. Again, it doesn't matter which one goes where. And then we find our dimensions of our box. So x times x will give me x squared. Again, you could fill in the opposing sides. X times 2 will give us 2x. So the bottom is also 2. And on the second row, x times what will give us 7x. If the left is 7, the right is 7. Check that last box. Is 7 times 2 14? It is. Therefore, our two factors are x plus 7 and x plus 2. It does not matter the order that you write those. If you want to put the x plus 2 first and then the x plus 7, that is completely okay. All right, number 11 is another one where it only has two terms. So I'm going to fill those in. X squared and 12x. X times x is going to give us that x squared. Again, filling in the opposing dimensions. And then x times what would give you 12x. That's just going to be 12. So my two factors here is an x and an x plus 12. All right, and then the last one for this row, x squared plus 12x plus 27. So fill in the x squared and the 27. Make your x. So we want to see what will multiply to give me 27x squared. And we want to see what will add up to give me that 12x. So let's think of our factors of 27. 1 and 27, 3 times 9, those are the ones that come to my mind. And so if I look at those with the only two choices, remember I need them to add up to 12, and that would be our 3 and our 9. So now I'm going to take the 3x and the 9x, can fill them in for my x, or you could just go straight to filling in the two blocks. And then we are ready to factor. X times x, again, fill in the opposing sides. X times what will give me 3x, that's 3, can put a 3 at the bottom. Second row, x times what will give me 9x. Again, if the left side is 9, the right side is 9, and then we always want to check. And if we do 9 times 3, we do indeed get 27. So the factors for number 12 are x plus 3 and x plus 9. So hopefully you're getting the hang of these by now. I've got 3 more to work through with you. Once again, the blocks are already drawn in, so we'll get started. Fill in our x squared and our 24. We want to see what will multiply to give me 24x squared. And what will add up to give me 11x. So let's start by listing the factors of 24. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8. And I could write some more, but I think I just realized that 3 plus 8 well, if I can get my pen to cooperate with me. Sorry, guys. Three plus 8 will give me 11. So I can fill in my 3x and my 8x into the x, or again, you can go straight to your blocks. Doesn't matter which one goes where. So x times x is my x squared. Then we ask us x times what gives me 3x. That will be 3. So if the top is 3, the bottom is 3. Then if we go to the second row, if we see 8x, that would be x times 8 would give me 8x. If the left is 8, then the right is 8. And 8 times 3 is 24. So my two factors are x plus 3 and x plus 8. All right, on the home stretch, number 14, we fill in the x squared and the 2. Make our x. Again, we're looking to see what multiplies to give me 2x squared. And we want to see what will add up to give me 3x. And this is one of those, in my opinion, super easy ones, because we only have one option. If we're going to multiply to get a 2, our only option is 1 times 2. So that's our winner. So we're going to fill in our 1x and our 2x. Again, if you don't want to put the 1 in front of the x, that's fine. So 1x and 2x. And then last but not least, our factors. X times x will give us x squared. Fill in your x to the right and your x at the bottom. X times what gives us 1x. I think this is the part where I like writing the 1 just because that's easier for me to think about. Oh, x times 1 will give me 1x. Again, I can put the 1 at the bottom in the second row to get a 2x. 2 times x will give me 2x. And then over on the right will be a 2. So 1 times 2 is indeed 2. So my two factors are x plus 1 and x plus 2. All right, and for our final example from this set of practice problems, again, two terms, so two boxes, x squared plus 4x, and then it's a straight factoring. X times x is going to give me x squared, filling in the right-hand side and the bottom. And then x times what gives you 4x? That's 4. So my factors are x and x plus 4. All right, so my question for the next slide is, are these problems any different? We have x squared plus 3x minus 10 and x squared minus 2x minus 24. Well, if you notice, they have three terms, which we've worked a lot of those, and we know when there are three terms, we draw our 4 blocks, so I already have those prepared. But there is something different about them. In every problem we've worked up until now, they have all only contained plus signs. And so if you notice, the first problem has a minus sign and a plus sign, and the second one has two minus signs. So we got to figure out, how does this change things, or does it? So let's go ahead and start out like we've been doing. Fill in our x squared. But this time, instead of writing a 10, we have to remember it's a negative 10. So I have to put a negative there to remind myself that I've got to pay attention. I don't want a positive 10 this time. I want a negative 10. So I'm going to see what multiplies to give me a negative 10x squared. And same idea from before, I still want to see what's going to add up to give me a positive 3x. So I have to remember that when I'm listing the factors of negative 10, I'm not really sure which number gets the positive and which number gets the negative. So personally, what I do is I usually just list the factors of straight 10 and then kind of think through it and be like, well, would I add them? Would I subtract them? And that will kind of help me figure out how I'm going to get a positive 3x from those factors. So this first one might be a little hard, but hang in there. So if I list my factors of 10, again, I'm not worried about the negative right now. I've got 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. But again, I'm trying to get that number 3, and I know that one of those is actually going to need to be a negative so that I can multiply. So what I have to think about is, like, can I combine the numbers 1 and 10 to get 3? And when I say combine, can I add them or subtract them? And I can't do either one. So hopefully, if I take 2 and 5, I can combine those in such a manner that I can get a 3. And I realize that I can do that if I pick, what if I did a 5x and a negative 2x? Because I know that 5 minus 2 will give me a positive 3, and that is what I'm looking for in this problem. So I'm going to fill those in, 5x and a negative 2x. So we're going to fill in our dimensions now. So x times x will give us x squared. X times 5 will give us 5x. All right, here's the new part. We have a negative 2x. So that's going to be an x times negative 2. So put the negative 2 on the right. Again, that fourth block, double check, is 5 times negative 2, negative 10, and it is. So our factors this time, it's an x plus 5, because the 5 is just a 5, but when we write the other one, notice it's a negative 2, so this one's going to be x minus 2. So slightly different, but again, still that same process. All right, let's look at the next one. Fill in your x squared and a negative 24. So we are trying to get a negative 24x squared. And then we still want them to add up, but this time we want to get a negative 2x. So again, I'm not going to focus so much on the negative part to start with. I'm just going to think about the number 24 because I don't really know where my signs are going to need to be. So I'll jot these down. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Oh, I think I found it. Because if I take the numbers 4 and 6, I think I can get a 2 from there. And now remember, I actually need a negative 2. So again, it doesn't matter where you write the numbers as long as you fill them in. So to get a negative 2, I could take a 4x and a negative 6x. Because if I multiply 4x times negative 6x, that will give me negative 24x squared. And then if I combine them, aka add them, 4x and a negative 6x gives me negative 2x. So now I'm going to fill those in. Again, you pick which block you want to put them in. And now we are ready to do our factors. So x times x gives me x squared. X times 4 will give me 4x. X times, so be careful, this is a negative 6 to get a negative 6x. And then check that last block. 4 times negative 6 does indeed give us negative 24. So this time, one of our factors is x plus 4, and the other factor will be x minus 6. All right, let's look at 2 more, and then we're probably going to wrap this up. So we have x squared minus 10x plus 24. So once again, x squared, fill in our 24, make our x. Notice again we have one positive sign and one negative sign. I think they might be in slightly different places this time. We're trying to figure out what multiplies to give me 24x squared. And then we want to see what adds up to give me a negative 10x. Now, I didn't leave a whole lot of room here, so let me try to squeeze this in. I've got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Remember, I'm trying to get a negative 10x, but it's a positive 24. So that seems a little weird. At first, I thought about the 2 and the 12, and I was like, oh, I could do 12, a positive 12 and a negative 2. But when I would multiply those, if I did a positive 12 and a negative 2, that would give me negative 24. And I notice at the top part up here, I'm supposed to have a positive 24. So that one actually doesn't work. 8 and 3 are going to give me 11, but 4 and 6, I think we can use those. Because I know if I add 4 and 6, they give me 10. But I have to remember, I don't want 10, I want a negative 10. So for this, I'm going to need a negative 4x and a negative 6x. Again, it doesn't matter which one goes in which block. And now we write our factors in. X times x. Then we're going to have x times what gives me negative 4x. X times what gives me negative 6x. Oops, forgot to fill in my -4 earlier. All right, check that bottom right-hand box. Is -4 times -6 positive 24? It is. So notice this time, our answers are both of the factors have minus signs. So it's x minus 6 and x minus 4. So sometimes both of them will be negative. All right, and let's take one more. Got our x squared, our 5, make our x. What multiplies to give me 5x squared? And then when I want to see what adds up, so again, this is another one, we have to be careful. We want a negative 6x. And again, another quick one. Our only option for a 5 is a 1 and 5. But again, I'm trying to get a positive 5, but I need a negative 6 when I add. So my best choice here is we can make a negative 1x and a negative 5x. Because a negative 1 times a negative 5 is going to give me a positive 5, and a negative 1 plus a negative 5 is going to give me a negative 6. So fill those in, our negative 1x, our negative 5x, and then back to our fun factoring. X times x gives me x squared. X times negative 1 is going to give me a negative 1x. Second row, x times negative 5 will give me negative 5x squared. Check that last box. A negative 1 times a negative 5 is indeed a positive 5. So my two factors are x minus 1 and x minus 5. I forgot there's one last type that I want to go over before I give you your practice problems and finish up for today. I've put two problems here, x squared minus 25 and x squared minus 16. So I see two terms, so I immediately think, okay, my two boxes. So I fill in my x squared. Notice it's a negative 25. And so I'm like, okay, great. Just like we've been doing, so x times x gives me x squared. I can fill in those x's. And then I realized that negative 25, there's nothing I can multiply x by to get a negative 25. So that doesn't work. I used two blocks, but it didn't work out this time. So what do? The same thing would happen with that second example. So these are what are called a difference of two squares. So if you notice, the first term, which is x, is really the same thing as x squared, and that 25 is really the same thing as 5 squared. So anytime you have two perfect squares, which is the case for both of these problems, two blocks do not work because there is not a greatest common factor. So again, we've looked at drawing two blocks or drawing four blocks. So if two blocks doesn't work, I guess we're going to need four blocks. So let's figure out how that's going. So since two blocks didn't work, I guess we will need to use four blocks. But it's kind of weird because we always think about that middle term. So we can actually rewrite these so that they have a third term. And we'll just say it's 0. So I'm going to fill in the x squared and the negative 25. I'm trying to figure out what multiplies to give me negative 25x squared. And then I want to see what will add up to give me a 0x. And we don't have a whole lot of choices in this problem. We know that 1 times 25 is 25, and we know that 5 times 5 is 25. But remember, we're trying to get a 0 when we add these. So I think we're going to have to go with the 5s, but remember, when we fill those in, one would need to be a positive 5x and one would need to be a negative 5x. So when we multiply, we get a negative 25, and we add, we get 0. So we'll fill in our 5x and our negative 5x. So x times x gives us x squared. You can fill in the corresponding sides. X times 5 is going to give me 5x. X times negative 5 will give me negative 5x. Oops, I forgot to fill those in. Check that last box. And 5 times negative 5 gives us negative 25. So our two factors are x plus 5 and x minus 5. So if you notice, we had talked about both of these terms were perfect squares. And when we factor, we get x plus 5 and x minus 5. So they look almost identical, but opposite signs. All right, let's do one last example. So we've got our x squared, our negative 16. We fill in. We want to see what will multiply to give me negative 16x squared. And what will add up, I forgot to write this out this time, but remember there's no middle term, so we can rewrite this as x squared plus 0x minus 16. So we're going to fill in our 0x. So we've got 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. And if we're trying to get a 0 from this, the numbers are going to need to be the same. So we can pick 4 and 4, but remember, one will need to be positive and one will need to be negative. And then finally, x times x. Fill in the corresponding sides, x times 4. Second row, again, it's a negative 4x, so that's x times negative 4. And that bottom right-hand box, make sure it works. 4 times negative 4 is indeed negative 16. So our factors are x plus 4 and x minus 4. Once again, one is positive and one is negative. This is called the difference of two squares. All right, and I'm going to leave you with some practice. I would like for you to press pause and work through these questions. Notice that this is highlighting the difference of two squares. So the questions we just went over, notice these only have two terms. So those are going to be different. But for all of these, you will need to draw the 4 blocks. This will take you some time. So once you have completed these, you can press play. The next slide is only going to list the answers. It is not going to have me working all of them out. So if you have questions, you will need to email me. Okay, here are the answers that I promised. Again, check. See how you did, and please email me if you have any questions. Factoring is not easy, and it's super hard to try to teach this remotely. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to do a Google Meet, set that up with you guys, and work through any more examples that you need help with. So your homework for this week is to take the factoring quiz in Canvas. We will spend another week on factoring, but it will be a little bit harder than what we've done this week. Don't let that scare you. The more you practice, the easier it will get. Just make sure that you have watched last week's video and you've taken the 2 quizzes that were assigned in Canvas from 7.1 to 7.4 and 7.5 to 7.8. Also check PowerSchool for any missing work you have from 3rd quarter, and email me for instructions on what to do to get those missing assignments made up. Hope you guys have a great week, and again, please reach out to me if you need help.